What's up, YouTube? This is True Raw for TV. Wilt Chamberlain obviously is one of the great players, one of the greatest players of all time. He's the only player in NBA history to average 30 points and 20 rebounds in his career. He's one of only two players, the other being Michael Jordan, to average at least 30 points per game in their NBA career. But it was during one season, the 1961-62 season, when Wilt Chamberlain did something that will almost surely never be done before, or never be done again, and that is a player averaging 50 points per game during the season. Before his death in 1999, Wilt Chamberlain, on a couple of occasions, stated that he felt that the 1990s NBA was watered down compared to the 1960s, and that he would average 60 to 70 points per game at his peak at age 25 in the 1990s. He said this on a couple of occasions. One time he said this, I believe it was during the 1997 All-Star break. During the All-Star game, he was being interviewed by Craig Sager. I think that's what the venue was. He's been interviewed by Craig Sager, and matter of fact, I don't know if it was the All-Star game or whether it was during the All-Star festivities. But anyway, the fact of the matter was, he was being interviewed, and he told Craig Sager that he think that he would average 60 or 70 points per game in the NBA in the 1990s.
One of the top 50 players of all time, Clyde Drexler. You're having a lot of fun.
Hey, this is like being a kid in a candy store. I've been an avid NBA fan for many, many years. And this occasion is one of the most historic occasions in the history of the NBA. And so I'm having a great time.
What's your most prized autograph?
Oh, well, the greatest of all time. He's right here in front of me. Signed a couple of my books for my young children, and I couldn't be happier.
Well, is it true? Would you like to tell Clyde how many points you would score if you played the game today? How many points do you average?
Well, you got to understand, with the rules of the day, with the offense not allowed to touch you, can't come in and put 3 or 4 guys around you when you don't have the ball. Probably about 65 or 70 might be a good thing, you know.
All right, thanks, guys. Back to Dick and you.
And that's conservative, I bet.
He also said this in an interview that he did around that time, a sit-down interview he did with, it was a joint interview with him and Bill Russell and Marv Rashad. No, it wasn't Marv Rashad, excuse me, it was with Bob Costas. And he said that he would average 60, 70 points per game in that interview.
Today? Well, with Russ being as old as he is and so on and so forth, I do a whole lot of things.
You're 25. You're 25 years old. The 25-year-old Wilt Chamberlain, who didn't just have the inside game, but had the fadeaway, put the ball on the floor a little bit.
Somebody must have told you about this.
I remember it.
Okay, right.
Trust me. The 25-year-old Wilt Chamberlain, transplanted into today's NBA. What do you do?
Well,
You can take Russell with you.
It's simple for me. It may be a little different for Russ, but simple for me. I think it'd be as easy for Russ. You see, with the new rules, which are all slanted to help the offense. Now, when I get the ball, instead of having 2 and 3 people and Russ all like me at the same time, I'm by myself with one guy. I would love it. I would love it. 50 points, maybe 60 points, maybe 70 points a game. Because I have nobody. Wait a minute. Well, you asked me a question, right?
70 a game.
Well, you know, the last 10 games, I was talking to Russ about the last 10 games of my 61-62 season, right before I scored 100 points, I averaged about 71 points a game.
Yeah, you were on a rampage.
Yeah, but I'm saying to you, but it's easier now. I was too fast, I was too strong. One guy is not going to take me down.
Yeah. I remember hearing him say that. I remember we talked about that at school. At that point at time, I think I was in 10th grade, I believe. No, I was in 11th grade. Take that back. I was 11th grade when he said that. These are my thoughts on this. I believe that he's being sincere when he says this. I don't think he's really joking. I think he's being sincere. And people got to understand in the context of why he's saying this. He's talking about the fact that you got to remember during the 1961-62 season, he shot the ball 39 times a game. He shot it 39 times a game. Matter of fact, I believe the 61-62 seasons are the first seasons where a player made more than 50% of his shots. I think it was him and Walt Bellamy. They're the first players to make more than half their shots in the season, which at that point in time was insane. Like he said, not only the rules allow players back then to double hand check. We talk about bringing hand checking back, but I brought this point up. Before, I think the early 70s, players were allowed to double hand check, use both hands. Not to mention the fact that, as Wilt said, you could triple team. So Wilt was often mobbed, briefly, when he got the ball. So part of the reason why Wilt Chamberlain's field goal percentages were a little bit lower than what you would expect is because of that. That's why he shot 46% from the floor his rookie year. It wasn't because he wasn't skilled. It was because of the physicality, the sheer physicality of the NBA at that time. There was a such thing as mauling. So even though we consider the NBA more physical in the 90s, by the standards in which he played, it was less physical. One-on-one, with some double teaming, but primarily one-on-one coverage. I understand where he's coming from with that. My pushback against that, though, is this. This is my pushback against that. Because I've thought about this for many years. Number one, in the 90s, the pace of the game began to slow. You see, when Wilt was playing in the early 1960s, the 60s in general was the fastest pace in the history of the NBA, even faster than today. I mean, you got to remember, teams were averaging 116, 118 points a game, 125 points per game without a three-point shot. And, because it took a lot of long twos back then, shooters were not as skilled overall as today. I will give them that. They were great shooters, but over across the board, shooters were not as skilled as they were today. So for them to be averaging that many points and more than today, they had to really be going up and down the court at a fast pace. And oftentimes they took the first available shot, which was often a long-range two, which, as we know, is not the most efficient shot in the world. Plus, look at the fact these guys were being double-teamed and double hand-checked. There was real defense being played. That's why field goal percentages were so low in the 50s, especially in the 50s into the 60s. So teams had 130 possessions a game. Teams were getting 70, 80 rebounds a game. Whereas today that number is a lot lower. Teams are getting 50 rebounds a game. And teams are having 100 or 90, I guess, possessions a game. Rarely 100. So what I'm telling you is, even though I think Wilt would be more efficient, with his strength and his speed, as he put it, he would be shooting in the 60th percentile in the 90s. More than likely. in the 60 percentile of 58, 59%, as opposed to 47, 48, 49, 50%. But that'll be offset with fewer possessions, especially if you're talking about the late 90s, when the league was starting to average only 97, 93, 99, 93, 91. See, at that point in time, it would be almost impossible for him to average 50, 60, 70 points. Now, if you're talking about those Denver Nugget teams in the 80s, that was averaging 126 points a game, I could see that being more likely. I could see him averaging 60 points a game, not 70, but I could see him, if everything went right, when the year they averaged 126.5, they just let him shoot the ball 30-some times a night. He got to the foul line 15 times a night. I could see it then. But by the 90s, late 90s, no, it wasn't going to happen. Another thing that I think would hurt him is, we all know Wilt Chamberlain never fouled out in an NBA game. But I believe because they called more, the game, even though it was more physical, you couldn't get away with as much in the 90s as you did in the 60s. I think that he would get in more foul trouble. Now, we know Wilt didn't like to foul out. I can't help but see him foul out a couple times. I could see him sometimes getting in foul trouble just because of his sheer strength. Just him, coming down, blocking some guy, and the guy flies. Because, even though he didn't do it like today, we had guys that flopped back then. Which Robin's one of them. So I could see Wilt getting into foul trouble a little bit more than he did in his actual career, when a lot more was let, as far as physical play was allowed, even more so than the 90s. And then also, another thing I'm having a problem with the 60, 70 point thing. I can't think of a coach with the money that those guys were making even in the 90s compared to the 60s, right? I can't think of a coach who would allow the offense to be totally dominated by one player like that. Like I don't know if that would work in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just not certain if that would work. Plus, come on, I know we kind of live with rose-colored glasses, but we had prima donnas in the 90s too. A lot of those guys are not gonna like a dude shooting the ball 40 times a night and the next guy shooting it 11 times. The next guy maybe 9 in the pecking order, 8. They're not gonna like that. They're gonna want their numbers, because their numbers are gonna help them get bigger contracts. These guys were making millions of dollars even then. So it's hard for me to see a guy like Wilt scoring that many points. What I realistically think is going to happen with Wilt Chamberlain, what I think would happen is, if it's in the early 90s, like 1990, 91, on a bad team, like a team that went 17-65, and the roster was terrible, like Kobe in 2006, you know what I'm saying? Mike at 87, something like that. I could see him averaging 40. I could see Wilt averaging 40. In the late 90s, I could see Wilt averaging maybe 35, which is a lot, considering that Al Iverson won the scoring title with 26 points a game. Remember, Wilt left a lot of points on the board with free throws, so that's a lot. Matter of fact, let me up that up a little bit. Let me say 45 in the early 90s. I'll give you 45, because I could see him. I could see him going something like 8 or 15 from the line on average, because he's a little bit better free throw shooter when he was younger. Let's say on average he goes 8 or 15 from the line. And let's say on a really, really bad team, let's go 18 of, let's say 18 of 30 from the floor. What is that? 36 plus 8, 44. Yep, well, 45 points. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. You know what I'm saying? But that's just my take on it, man. Tell me what you guys think.